Coming up on Network Africa, the Cameroonian military denies being involved in a video showing the killing of women and children. South Africa's Duduzane Zuma's alleged homicide case postponed till August. And Guineans continue to protest against the increase in fuel prices. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Temitope Fagbemi. We begin today in Cameroon, where the military has denied the involvement of any government soldiers in a video which shows men in uniform shooting dead women and children. The shocking video, which has caused outrage on social media in the country, shows the men blindfolding a young girl as well as two women, one of whom has a baby strapped to her back. Speaking French with Cameroonian accents, the yet-to-be-identified men killed the group after accusing them of belonging to militant group Boko Haram. The video was reportedly filmed in the northern region of Mayo Sanaga, where the Cameroonian army has a base. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has vowed to help end vicious and violent conflicts in Africa. Speaking to journalists during a NATO summit in Brussels, Mr. Trump says Africa is on the very strong list of priorities. The U.S. is active in counter-terrorism operations and training in Africa. There are about 7,000 troops and 34 individual U.S. bases for staging posts across Africa and probably many more secret facilities. Last year, 4 members of the U.S. Special Forces were killed in an ambush in Niger. It was the largest loss of American military lives in Africa since the Black Hawk Down killings in Somalia 25 years ago. To legal matters, the son of former South African President Jacob Zuma has appeared before another court today, his second appearance this week. He's been charged with 2 counts of culpable homicide following a car accident in 2014, which resulted in the death of 2 people. Scuffles were recorded outside the court as the chief executive of Afrikaner interest group AfriForum was shouted down by black interest political party Black First, Land First. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, tells us more.
It's the second court appearance this week for 34-year-old Duduzane Zuma. In court were his twin sister Duduzane and other supporters. There was also a fleeting sighting of the father of the accused in the court premises. This session was a brief one as well.
All rise in court.
Duduzane Zuma faces 2 counts of culpable homicide and an alternative count for negligent driving in 2014. In 2015, the National Prosecuting Authority declined to prosecute him, but Afrikaner interest group AfriForum wouldn't let it go.
I wrote a letter to the National Public Prosecutions requesting a nolle prosecute certificate, which then prompted the NPA to do further handling on the matter by the Office of Advocate Sibongile Mzinyate, who then took a decision to review the prior decision that was taken by the Director of Public Prosecutions to decline the prosecution of Mr. Duduzane Zuma. Hence, we are here today now, wherein the reviewal decision instructed this office to proceed with prosecution.
The chief executive of AfriForum, Carrie Krell, struggled to get a word in, but black empowerment interest political group Black First, Land First would have none of that.
In fact, our position as BLF and with many other black formations that we have seen united under the hashtag Free Duduzane is that free Duduzane and arrest de Klerk. Why is de Klerk not in jail? De Klerk is in charge of the murder and massacres of our people. This is documented. No one can deny it.
The accused has been released on warning and the case postponed to the 23rd of August 2018 to allow the prosecution time to submit necessary documents ahead of fixing a trial date. From the Randburg Magistrates Court, Johannesburg, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
Ahead of this month's general elections, members of Zimbabwe's main opposition party, the Movement for Democratic Change, have marched to the Independent Election Agency to demand reforms which are vital for a credible vote. Zimbabwe will choose a new president and members of parliament on July 30 in the first election since Robert Mugabe was ousted from office. The election will pit Mugabe's successor, President Emmerson Mnangagwa, and his ZANU-PF party against challengers led by Nelson Chamisa of the Movement for Democratic Change, MDC. The MDC says it is wary of any attempts to put it at a disadvantage to Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF, insisting there must be an agreement on how to design, print and store ballot papers. Mr. Chamisa has rejected the ballot papers being printed by the Electoral Commission.
The election will not take place if it is not in compliance with the law and the rules of transparency and accountability.
It should be an independent board. It will operate on its own. But from the look of things, there's a total interference of the ruling party, which is very wrong in terms of law. So that's the reason why we are protesting.
Let's get more on the story from a Zimbabwean journalist, Nigel Mutumbo. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Nigel, what more can you tell us about the protests and the demands from the MDC?
Well, the MDC has pretty much two demands which are shared by most opposition political parties. The one being on the voters' roll, that they need a biometric voters' roll analyzer. And secondly, they are demanding that they have access to monitoring the printing of the ballot.
Now, the demonstration is a reflection of how deep the mistrust runs after years of contested elections under former President Robert Mugabe. What response has the Electoral Commission given to their demands?
Well, the Electoral Commission has not really been forthcoming insofar as ensuring that they are transparent and they are, bending to the demands of the opposition. Instead, they are remaining adamant that, number one, they are not going to show the opposition the ballot paper before the 30th of July, and the voters' roll that is being released is enough, is sufficient. So in essence, there is a deadlock between the opposition political parties and the Electoral Commission.
Now, the elections are just days away, so how possible is it for the ZEC to meet these demands if it actually wants to?
It's very possible. It's actually just will be in conformment with a High Court ruling that was passed to say that, number one, ZEC should release the provisional voters' roll that was used for inspection. Secondly, to comply with the High Court ruling that the Commission should be transparent, it being a public process. As such, it's something that is feasible to ensure that observers, both local and international, the opposition, and all parties that are contesting this election, to have access to the provisional voters' roll in tandem with the biometric voters' roll, and also have a feel and be satisfied with the printing procedures of the ballot paper. So I would say it should be possible.
Now, this is the first election post-Mugabe, which is pitting the younger generation against the older generation, so to speak. What should the world expect from this election?
Well, one would really hope that this election does not, the current deadlock does not translate into any physical confrontation of any sort, is that would be unfortunate and deplorable. However, the world should be in a position to also support the democratic process in Zimbabwe by pushing the government and the Electoral Commission to conduct the elections in a transparent manner that will ensure the process is credible and that the results are indeed a reflection of the will of the people of Zimbabwe.
The army has promised to remain neutral during this election. How trustworthy is this promise, Nigel?
Well, the army, the statement by the military was indeed a step in the right direction. However, they need to really do more and come out more. Number one, by categorically stating that they will respect the wishes of the people. They will also be in a position to acknowledge any winner, because the challenge is that no one has really moved to debunk the statements made that the army will not salute anyone without liberation credentials. That belongs to the politics of the past, and they really need to come out to say they are for the people of Zimbabwe, and they need, because this is a confidence building process that they need to be embarking on. And just one statement is not enough. More needs to be done so that they are really clear that they are neutral and a non-partisan player.
Finally, Nigel, give us a feel of what the mood is like in Zimbabwe as the citizens, as voters, the political parties get ready for the July 30 elections.
There is almost tangible anxiety and to a certain extent a level of fear, particularly that some members of the public received text messages from the ruling party, which were essentially campaign messages. But the import of those messages was that they were carrying the name of the person, the constituency that they will be voting in, and given the history of the Zimbabwean elections, this has already instilled some level of fear within the electorate. The demands by the opposition, yes, they did pull quite a big crowd, quite a huge crowd, and the sentiment around the neutrality of ZEC is being shared not only by the opposition, but by also civil society and other international observation groups. So there is a level of anxiety, and people are really wondering whether this election would bring about credibility to the electoral processes in Zimbabwe. But one would hope that the bare minimum, the voters' roll issue and the ballot box issue, ballot paper issue can be resolved going forward.
Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Mutumbo, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
It's a pleasure.
Angry Guineans are still out on the streets of Conakry protesting the recent increase in fuel price, which has also pushed up the cost of living. The country has been faced with repeated strikes in the last year by mine workers as well as teachers, and has seen civil unrest over local elections.
This week's protest is part of an ongoing call by unions to mobilize against the fuel hike, as well as what they say is increased economic hardship in the country. The Guinea fuel hike is the latest in a series of events that have angered the citizens.
We have all come together to protest against the unilateral decision to increase the price of fuel and also call out the arrogance of certain members of government. This needs to stop. The cost of fuel should be 8,000 Guinean francs. 1 cent on top of that is 1 cent too much.
Political tensions have also been high in Guinea following disputed local elections in February that have fueled anti-government sentiment. The government says that the fuel hike was a last-ditch measure taken due to fluctuating prices on the global market. Activists have vowed to continue to fight the government's decision.
Once again, the government's argument on this issue is not convincing. They can't say that they have increased the price of fuel at the behest of the banks, the World Bank and the IMF. We are here to show solidarity to the unions who have put together the protest march, and we will continue to protest until the government changes its decision for the good of the people.
Analysts say the escalating violence is linked to opposition fears that the president may seek to change the constitution to seek a third term in the 2020 elections.
Still to come on the program, the United Nations calls for the prosecution of perpetrators of sexual violence and killings in South Sudan. Please stay with us for details.